New Landing's Job Chat is brought to you in part by the Prosperity Advisory Group, the next step in your financial future, and by the EBS Group with an unparalleled background in Oracle solutions and services.
What is master networking, and what do coffee and lunch have to do with it? You'll get those answers today on Job Chat. My name is Hector Silva. My co-host is Don Apple.
Hi, Hector.
Don, are you a master networker?
I was thinking about that. I don't believe I'm a master networker. I'm pretty good at lunch, pretty good at coffee.
Well, our guest today is Alana Muller.
Alana Muller is president of Kauffman FastTrac, the nation's leading provider of training to aspiring and existing entrepreneurs. Alana has a master's degree in business administration from the University of Chicago, and she is the author of an online blog, coffeelunchcoffee.com, a practical field guide for professional networking. Alana, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Welcome, Alana. What is your process for networking, and what exactly is coffee, lunch, coffee?
Well, that's my process. So I discovered years ago, I left a job that I'd been in for many years, and I decided that I needed to determine a new career path for myself. And the way that I did that was to structure my day by meeting people. And after a time, I realized that my process was to run through a typical morning routine, to schedule a morning meeting, a lunchtime meeting, and an afternoon meeting. And so I came up with the process, coffee, lunch, coffee, a morning coffee meeting, a lunchtime meeting, and then a mid-afternoon coffee session.
So what you're saying is you can't get a job sitting at home.
That's exactly right. And what I find too frequently is that people are waiting by the phone. They think that by submitting a resume to find a job, as an example, is an effective and appropriate way to look for a job, and I'm here to tell you it's not. I think that the only way to find a job, to develop sales leads, to help spread your own reputation in the community in a positive way is through networking. I've heard often people say it's not what you do, it's who you know, and I think that's right. I know for myself, when I left my job, I needed to figure out who did I know in the community. I had been so heads down in my own company for so many years, and I wasn't sure who to turn to determine what my next career path would be. So I started thinking through, who do I volunteer with? Who are the parents on my child's soccer team, etc. And so what I did was I just started calling people. And I will tell you that between the time that I left my job and the time that I actually took a long-term consulting assignment, there was 9 months. And I met 200 new people, and I had 160 meetings in that time. And frankly, I don't honestly know if that's a big number or a small number, but it was my number. Everybody's number will be different. And what I found is that by going through my process, by making an effort to structure my day in a coffee, lunch, coffee sort of way, that I was able to come up with my next trail in the path.
Was this daily or every once in a while? Or?
It was absolutely daily. So my goal was to have 15 touch points per week. So three meetings per day if possible. And I'll tell you, I didn't always hit that. And of course, I'm talking about the business week. So Monday through Friday, my goal was to meet 3 different people in any given day. And frankly, not to take coffee, lunch, coffee too literally, some of those meetings were by telephone, and I found those to be, in some cases, equally, if not more effective than some of my face-to-face meetings. So I think that people can structure their coffee, lunch, coffee approach in a way that suits their needs and their day.
When you say it's not what you know, who you know, the what you know doesn't go away. It's the who you know that gets you to those interviews where you can show what you know.
That's right.
But are there any specific type people that you were going after to network with?
Well, for me, and it will be different for everybody, for me, I said that I was looking to either start my own company or to find a leadership position in a small to mid-market sized company in the Kansas City area specifically. And so I wanted to find people who were somewhat like-minded, people who either had small to mid-market sized companies or could introduce me to people who had small to mid-market sized companies. I was looking for a particular culture in the company that I went to next. I was looking for what I called a seat at the table, someplace that would enable me to help think through, have some decision-making authority, make those decisions, and whether right or wrong, they were my decisions.
Were these people you knew, or people that somebody referred you to, or how did you get a hold of these people?
Honestly, of the 200 people that I met, I really met them. I didn't know any of them before I started this process. I started with 5 names. They were all people who I'd worked with in a volunteer capacity. I talked to them before I left my job, and I said, I came up with this idea. I think I'm going to leave my job. What do you think? And frankly, 4 of the 5 said, brilliant idea. I wish you would have thought of it sooner. One person told me I was out of my mind. And then they started introducing me to people. And each time I went to a meeting, I said, can you tell me anybody else that you think I should meet with? And that's how it happened. In fact, one meeting that I would say was very pivotal to my own success and my journey was a fellow who I'd been hearing about for years, but we never met. I called him. He willingly met me for coffee. When we met at a Starbucks. When we got there, he said, I'm sorry, I only have 30 minutes to meet with you. And so we talked very quickly. I don't even think we purchased coffee. And we, during the course of those 30 minutes, he said several names of people that he thought I should meet. And he said, don't bother writing these down. I will send you the information. And true to his word, by the time I got home, about an hour later, I had an email from him with 8 electronic cards. He said, call me. So I called him, and he went through one by one each person. He told me, again, why he thought I should contact them, why they might be interested in what I was doing, and gave me some sort of insight into what it was that might assist the 2 of us to have a meaningful conversation. Of the 8 names that he gave me, 6 of them met with me in person, 1 met with me by phone, and the 8th I was unable to reach. So I would say that was a pretty successful networking day.
That was a very you're very outgoing. You're very personable. What advice would you have for someone who is not?
It's interesting. I recently wrote a post specifically targeted to the introvert.
Okay.
It's called Bashful. And I'll tell you, especially introverts, I think, can have deep and meaningful conversations. I was speaking with a friend of mine who is a self-proclaimed introvert, and he described his approach about going to conferences or to large breakfast functions. He will walk into the room, he'll circle the perimeter 3 times, and if nobody speaks to him, he'll leave. And he said that he had been reading Coffee, Lunch, Coffee, and a few weeks ago, he decided to wade into the fray. So he simply walked to the center of the room. He met an individual. He discovered they had tons in common simply by saying hello. He stuck out his hand, said, my name is. The 2 of them struck up a conversation. They ended up talking for over an hour. It turns out they both have 3 children. Their children go to the same school. It was meaningful. They found that they were able to sort of cut through the divide. And it's not a matter of meeting many people. It's about the quality of those conversations. And so even the shy person, the introvert, I think can have great networking success simply by focusing on the quality of those conversations, making them truly meaningful. And even getting those conversations started can be difficult. So I always suggest to people, have a few questions in mind, a few things that you can offer up to get the conversation going, whether it's a great new restaurant, a fabulous movie that you just saw, something that really gets people to feel at ease and welcomes them into the conversation.
You have 160 meetings, meet 200 people. The agenda, the goals of each meeting, is it the same, or do you adjust it based on who you're talking to?
I think you have to adjust it based on who you're talking to. But I will tell you, for most of those meetings, I didn't have anything specific in mind. My goal was to get to know them, to raise my name in their mind in terms of thinking through when they heard of opportunities or when they thought of opportunities that I might be interested in. I wanted them to get to know me, and I wanted to get to know them. And what I found is whether I asked for the meeting or somebody else asked for the meeting, that we were able to exchange and share information that was meaningful to both of us. So in the case when I left my job and was trying to determine my next step in my career path, I found that I didn't have anything specific in mind. My goal was simply to get to know them. And by being somewhat ambiguous, I would say, but really I think the operative word would be flexible, to be flexible to see where that conversation would lead us, whether it was to another meeting down the road, if I could help them in some way, or if they could potentially turn me on to another person to meet. I found that to be a success.
So you weren't looking for just a touch point, you were looking to establish some sort of relationship.
That's exactly right, and I think that is the whole point. I think if it's simply to collect business cards, I don't think that there's much point in that. You know, some people will go, for example, to a networking event, which, by the way, I'm not a huge fan of. I find them to be difficult to interact with other people. But if you can find one or two or even three people that you can connect with and have a meaningful conversation, I think coming away with those 3 business cards as opposed to a stack of 20 can be much more effective.
How about follow-up on these meetings?
My number one recommendation for follow-up is the thank you note. It is something that sounds so obvious. Our mothers taught us this growing up, and I'll tell you, so few people do it. Today, I think that people have a tendency, if they write a thank you note, they tend to write one by email, and I think that's okay. What's more effective, though, is the good old-fashioned handwritten thank you note. That's my personal favorite. It gets you remembered. I tell people that I think the handwritten thank you note on the nicest possible stationery that you can afford is really important. I think it will get you noticed, and people will remember that you took the time to actually write a thank you note to express your appreciation for the time that they spent with you.
I know that you said networking meetings aren't the best place to meet people. What are good places to meet people?
Coffee shops. No, truly, I think that the best way to meet people is through referrals. So once you get 1 or 2 under your belt, I think asking those individuals to refer you to others is the most effective way to meet people. And certainly, the networking event has its place and can be effective. I just think that it's often more difficult to have those meaningful, important conversations and build relationships.
But there are other places such as churches or
Absolutely.
Social events where
Yes.
you can also get referrals.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, when people say, so where do I begin? I take them back to where I began, and that was through the community. What volunteer things did I engage in? Again, who were parents of children on my son's sporting teams, other families at the school, of course, church events. There are, as you well know, job clubs, and networking clubs, and I think that those can be really effective. For some people, it's what is your passion? If your passion is reading books, join a book group or get a book group going. And I think that simply by having the interaction with other people can be very effective in terms of meeting others, whether they're in your book club or they can refer you to people outside of the club.
Yeah. You have to have a focus, though. You have to have a goal that you want to reach. So before you meet these people or when you're meeting these people, you have to be able to tell them what it is that you're looking for.
Right. That's right. So what I did, and this is what I recommend to people, determine what that goal is. So for me, it was to find either a next job or a next step in my career path. For others, it will be to build their sales pipeline or to build a base of sales leads. For others, it will be an effort to market their company. And so whatever your goal is, that's what you need to lead with. And so I had sort of a standard email that I would use to introduce myself to my potential networking contacts. And I would say, hello, my name is Alana Muller. I was referred to you by John Doe. John thought that we would have a lot to talk about. I would love the opportunity to meet with you for coffee or lunch to learn more about your career path and your career trajectory. And I gave a brief synopsis of my background and asked when they might find time to meet. I will tell you, I never included my resume. I think that the point was not for them to give me a job or to offer me a job. It was simply for us to get to know one another. And so I think that everybody can come up with a general template, and you may need to alter it from person to person, but if you come up with a general template, whether it's for an email or to make phone calls to introduce yourself, I think people can get comfortable by having some sort of script. I think it helps people.
How does the blog come into play? Explain the blog.
So I'll tell you, after I discovered that I had this new process for networking, for structuring my day, which was really the point. It was how do I structure my day to reap the most benefit from any given work week?
And I think everybody needs that structure.
Something, just some framework to work within. Once I discovered that this was happening, people started asking me for meetings. They wanted to know, how was I doing it? I hear that you're meeting a lot of new people. How do you meet them? How do you get to know them? And so I started basically an outline of what it was that I either had done or was doing to meet all these new people. And I thought to myself, and this is really about 4 years ago now, I thought, I ought to write a book. And so I sat down one day, long after I'd taken a position, I sat down to write my book, and I discovered I couldn't just sit down to write a book. So I had the good fortune last fall to take a course at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, and I drove up to Omaha to take these classes with 3 others from Kansas City, and we had great conversations, and one of the individuals was actually writing a book, which in fact is coming out now. And I was just so impressed by what he was doing to get this book up and launched. And I thought, I really ought to pull out my Coffee Lunch Coffee outline. But I never did it. And then I saw, I don't know if you're familiar with TED, the TED Talks or TEDx, and it's basically a series of speakers on a variety of topics, really any topic. And I happened to see a very short but very powerful TED Talk by a fellow by the name of Matt Cutts. And his talk was all about try something new for 30 days. And he gave all kinds of examples of things he had done for 30 days. One month he rode his bike to work for 30 days. Another month he took a fabulous photograph every day for 30 days. Another month he gave up sugar, and of course on day 31 he ate a pile of candy. But one of the examples was during the month of November. It's called National Novel Writers Month. And the idea is that if you write approximately 1,700 words a day for every day during the month of November, you will leave November with a 50,000-word novel. And he says that he did this, and in fact, it was the worst novel known to humanity. But now at a cocktail party, he can say, when somebody says, "So what do you do, Matt?" He says, "I'm an author." And so I thought to myself, I probably am not going to write 1,700 words a day, but I can certainly write a blog post every day. So as the month of November arrived, I began my blog. So every day during the month of November, I wrote Coffee Lunch Coffee, and to my surprise and delight, it caught on. So people tell me that they've learned a lot, they've changed their own behaviors to really welcome networking into their lives.
Great. I don't know that I know 1,700 words.
You might if you try.
A real life success story. How did this networking get you to your employment?
It's actually, when I think about it, it's actually almost moving to me. So I mentioned the fellow who I met with for 30 minutes at Starbucks, and he gave me 8 names. And one of the names was a person here locally who works for a large insurance company. And I wasn't sure what it was that we had to share with each other, but she willingly met me. And we had coffee one morning on the plaza. And she opened by saying, "I only have 30 minutes. But I am a producer for a large insurance company, and my specialty is construction. Are there any companies that you want to meet?" And I said, normally I would have said no because I know nothing about the construction business. And I said, but I have heard about one company that I understand has the kind of culture that I would want to go to. And so she said, "Great, I'm actually taking the CFO of that company to the Chiefs game on Sunday. I'll see if there's anything going on." So true to her word, on Sunday I got an email from her, and she said, "Jeff is expecting your call tomorrow." Well, it turns out Jeff's wife and I worked together years ago. She even threw a baby shower for me at their home. And we had become what I call holiday card friends. We'd sort of stayed in touch. Once a year, we sent greetings to one another. So I called Jeff, and he couldn't have been nicer. And he said, I'd really love for you to come in and meet with our team. So I went in, I met the head of HR, I met the head of business development, and we sort of agreed to part the closest of friends because they didn't have anything that I was qualified for, and frankly, they didn't have anything that I was interested in. The head of HR called me back 6 weeks later, and she said, we've been thinking about you. We really enjoyed meeting you, and we're thinking of starting a new company that you might be perfect for. Would you come meet with the owners of our company? So I went in, and it was sort of love at first sight. We all really enjoyed the conversation, and this organization hired me as a consultant for 6 months. They ended up extending for 8 months, and during that time, I actually brought on an advisor who they already knew, somebody at the Kauffman Foundation, who was a good friend of mine and who assisted me with thinking through this new business concept. Once that consulting assignment was over, he said, why don't you come to the Kauffman Foundation? We have another consulting project for you. And lo and behold, here I am, the president of Kauffman FastTrac, which was the consulting assignment that I started. So, I think that what that shows you is that there's serendipity, of course, in the world, but it would not have happened had that initial phone call not been made, if that initial referral hadn't been made, and if the fellow who met me that day at Starbucks had said no. I don't know that I would have ever had these wonderful opportunities. And I find when I talk to people who have engaged in networking or brought networking into their day in some regard, they find that the opportunity abounds.
The other thing your story tells me is that there's no direct line.
That's right.
You speak to that first person, you don't expect that to be the person that's going to give you the job or that he's going to give you somebody's name that's going to give you the job. It could take a number of twists and turns before it gets to the job.
Absolutely. Truthfully, between the time that I had that original coffee meeting at Starbucks to the time that I started at the Kauffman Foundation was over a year, about a year and a half, actually. And so it's interesting how long it can take, but frankly, there were wonderful things happening in between, from the time that started to the time I took the position.
So perseverance and patience.
Absolutely. And a focus on networking. I think you have to invite networking into your schedule. It has to be something that you embrace. I know for many people it can be a daunting task. The idea of, do I really need to go and schedule these meetings? I'll tell you, on most mornings, I have a coffee meeting. During about half of the week, I have a lunch meeting. I've had to typically give up that afternoon coffee simply because I don't have the time for it. But I'll tell you, I get more out of each of those meetings, I'm sure, than I'm giving to other people. And what I find is that the information exchange, there's nothing like it. I find that I get something out of every interaction.
So it continues to give back to you.
It does.
Even when you're talking to other people that are doing the same thing that you were doing.
That's right. And one thing I tell people is always say yes. I was at an event once where everybody was required to get up and introduce him or herself, to say where we each worked, what our position was, and to give one piece of business advice. And Mary Ellen Sheets, the woman who started Two Men in a Truck, got up and she said, the best business advice I ever got that I now give is to always say yes. And I loved that, especially from a networking perspective. I think always say yes. Whether it's, yes, I'll meet you for coffee, or yes, I'm willing to have an email exchange with you, or yes, I'm willing to have a phone call with you, always say yes, because what I've discovered is you never know what you're going to get out of the experience.
Well, Alana, I'm glad you said yes to us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for sharing your networking tips. If somebody wanted to have coffee, lunch, or coffee with you, where could they reach you?
I'd love for them to sign on to my blog, coffeelunchcoffee.com. They can leave me a message there, and I would love to hear from everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alana, thank you so much. And of course, remember that all of our job chats are available to you anytime on our website, newlandingsjobchat.org.
And as always, until next time, may your days be full of health, happiness, and success.